Most people think financial collapses happen suddenly. A market crashes, banks fail, panic spreads. But history says something very different. The biggest changes in the world happen quietly, slowly, then all at once. And what I recently saw happening in China made one thing painfully clear. The global financial order may already be changing beneath our feet. Not next decade, not someday, right now. And if that's true, the US dollar may be entering the most dangerous phase of its existence. Because reserve currencies don't die from one event. They die when confidence disappears. And throughout history, every empire believed its currency would survive forever, until it didn't. Rome believed it. The Dutch believed it. The British believed it. Then the cycle turned. What's different this time is the speed. Because the world is no longer waiting for America to solve its debt problem. It's building alternatives. And China understands something most people still don't. The greatest power in the world is not military strength, it's financial trust. Before we go deeper, subscribe to the channel and hit the like button because this video may completely change the way you see money, investing, and the future of global power. Now here's what shocked me. When you study history carefully, you begin to notice patterns. Empires rise through productivity, innovation, strong education, and disciplined investment. Then success creates excess. Debt rises. Politics become more divided. Governments spend beyond their means. Money printing accelerates. And eventually the currency weakens. Not because the country disappears, but because confidence does. And today, the United States is showing many of those exact symptoms. America's national debt has exploded beyond levels that once seemed impossible. Interest payments alone are becoming one of the largest expenses in the federal budget. Think about that carefully. The government is now borrowing money to pay interest on the money it already borrowed. That's not sustainable long term. And historically, when nations reach this stage, they usually face only three choices: cut spending dramatically, raise taxes aggressively, or print more money. Politically, the first two are painful. So history shows governments almost always choose the third. And that's where the real danger begins. Because printing money feels harmless at first. Markets go up, asset prices rise, people feel wealthier. But underneath the surface, something else is happening. The value of money quietly erodes. Purchasing power declines. And eventually, foreign countries begin asking a dangerous question. Should we still trust this currency as the foundation of the world economy? That question changes everything. Now here's where China enters the story. While America became increasingly dependent on debt and consumption, China focused on infrastructure, manufacturing, supply chains, technology, and long-term strategic positioning. You can debate their politics, you can debate their system, but you cannot ignore the scale of what they've built. Entire industrial ecosystems, high-speed rail networks, strategic trade routes, energy partnerships, rare earth dominance. This isn't accidental, it's preparation. And the biggest shift isn't visible on the surface. It's happening in global trade agreements. More countries are beginning to settle trade outside the US dollar. That would have sounded impossible years ago. Now it's accelerating. China and multiple nations are building systems designed to reduce dependence on the dollar-based financial network. Why? Because relying entirely on one nation's currency creates vulnerability, especially when that nation increasingly weaponizes sanctions and monetary policy. So countries are diversifying, slowly at first, then faster. This is exactly how reserve currency transitions begin, not with headlines, with gradual behavioral change. That's the part most people miss. Reserve currencies don't collapse overnight. They decay through reduced demand. And the dollar's greatest strength has always been global demand. Countries needed dollars for trade, for oil purchases, for reserves, for stability. But what happens if fewer countries need as many dollars? Demand weakens. And when demand weakens, while supply explodes through debt and money creation, the mathematics eventually become brutal. Now let me say something important. This does not mean America disappears. People always misunderstand these discussions. The United States remains enormously powerful, innovative, productive, influential. But history isn't about absolutes. It's about relative decline. The British Empire didn't vanish overnight. Its financial dominance gradually shifted, and most citizens didn't recognize the transition while living through it. That's the scary part about historical cycles. They feel normal while they're happening. Now here's another warning sign almost nobody talks about: internal conflict. Throughout history, declining empires become increasingly divided internally. Politics turns emotional, wealth gaps widen, trust in institutions falls, and cooperation becomes harder. Why does this matter economically? Because long-term financial stability requires social cohesion. When nations become deeply fragmented, solving debt problems becomes politically impossible. Every solution hurts somebody, and divided societies struggle to make painful long-term decisions. So debt keeps growing, money printing continues, and confidence slowly weakens. Now imagine this scenario. Foreign nations reduce treasury purchases. Interest rates stay elevated. Debt servicing costs explode. The central bank faces pressure to intervene. What happens next? More liquidity, more monetary expansion, and potentially another massive wave of currency debasement. This is why inflation may not be temporary in the long run. It may be structural. And if that happens, ordinary people suffer first. Because inflation is not just higher prices, it's a transfer of wealth. Cash savers lose purchasing power. Asset owners benefit disproportionately. The middle class gets squeezed. That's why understanding macro cycles matters so much. This isn't just economics. It affects lifestyles, opportunities, and financial survival. Now let's talk about something even deeper: psychology. The global financial system runs on belief, not paper, not coins, belief. As long as people believe the dollar will hold value, the system functions smoothly. But when confidence begins cracking, behavior changes rapidly. Countries diversify reserves. Investors seek hard assets. Central banks buy gold. Alternative systems emerge. And we are already seeing many of these signals today. Central banks around the world have been accumulating gold at historic levels. Why? Because gold carries no counterparty risk. It doesn't rely on political promises. And historically, when trust in fiat systems weakens, hard assets regain importance. That doesn't mean the dollar disappears tomorrow, but it does suggest growing concern about long-term monetary stability. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people are completely unprepared for a world where the dollar loses relative dominance. Their savings are concentrated in depreciating cash. Their understanding of macroeconomics is minimal, and they assume governments will always maintain stability. History says otherwise. History says every financial order eventually changes. The only question is timing, and the signs today are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Massive debt expansion, geopolitical fragmentation, currency diversification, trade realignment, declining institutional trust. These are not isolated events. They are connected. Now I want you to think carefully about this. What if the next decade looks fundamentally different from the last 40 years? For decades, globalization pushed costs lower, interest rates declined, asset prices surged, and the dollar remained unquestioned. But what if that era is ending? What if we're entering a world defined by fragmentation, competition, resource nationalism, and monetary instability? Because that changes investment strategy entirely. It changes business models. It changes retirement assumptions. It changes geopolitical alliances. And most importantly, it changes opportunity. Every major transition in history destroys some fortunes and creates entirely new ones. The people who survive these periods are usually the ones who recognize reality early, not emotionally, not politically, objectively. That's the key. You cannot navigate a changing world using outdated assumptions. And one of the most dangerous assumptions today is believing the current monetary order is permanent. It isn't. No system in history ever was. Now, does this mean catastrophe is guaranteed? No. History is not destiny. Cycles can be managed if leaders make disciplined decisions early enough. But discipline is rare during periods of excess. That's why these moments become so dangerous. Because the incentives favor postponing pain. and postponed pain often becomes amplified pain later. So what should ordinary people actually do? First, understand the environment. Most people spend more time researching phones than studying the monetary system affecting their future. That needs to change. Second, diversify intelligently. Historically, periods of uncertainty reward balance, adaptability, and ownership of productive assets. Third, think globally. The world is becoming multipolar. Opportunities will emerge in unexpected places. And finally, don't confuse stability with permanence. That may be the most important lesson of all. The world changes gradually, then suddenly. And what I saw developing in China wasn't just economic growth. It was preparation for a different future. A future where financial power becomes more distributed. A future where the dollar may no longer sit alone at the center of the global system. Maybe that transition takes 5 years, maybe 15, maybe longer. But the direction matters more than the exact timing. Because once a cycle begins turning, reversing it becomes incredibly difficult. And history shows the nations that survive these transitions best are the ones willing to confront reality before everyone else does. Most people won't pay attention until the consequences become obvious. By then, the biggest moves have already happened. If you found this video valuable, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because the next decade may become one of the most important economic transitions of our lifetime, and understanding it early could make all the difference.